In this video, we're going to take a look at how to write an equation of a circle, how to interpret the equation of a circle, and how to graph the equation of a circle. So let's start with what the equation of a circle is. So if you'll pull up your vocab sheet, this will be the first page on your vocab sheet, and we'll fill it out together. So the formula is x minus h quantity squared plus y minus k quantity squared equals r squared. The ordered pair HK is the center of the circle and R is the radius of the circle. So there are a few things you need to notice about the equation. First of all, it's x minus h and y minus k, but the center is the opposite. So if you had me last year, you'll probably remember the asylum analogy. If you did not have me last year, when you are in an asylum, you don't act normal, think normal, speak normally. You do the opposite of what people expect you to do. So when you look at the parentheses in the equation, the h and k are in the asylum. They're not normal. So when you pull them out of the asylum to get the ordered pair for the center, they become opposite. Another way to think about it is when you factor and you set each piece equal to 0 and you're finding the zeros, once you solve, it's the opposite of what it was because you have to add to cancel subtraction and subtract to cancel addition. So it's a similar concept with the equation of a circle. And the other thing we need to notice is that the equation is r squared. So we have to take the square root of that in order to get the radius. So we'll start given a center and a radius, and then we'll write our equation and graph it. So putting this into the equation, the 4 becomes opposite quantity squared, plus, and that negative 3 becomes opposite quantity squared equals radius squared, or 25. So when I graph this, it's an approximation. What I do is I plot the center of the circle, so I'm going to go to 4, negative 3, and my calibration's off a little bit. And then from there, I'll use the radius to find 4 points on the circle directly above and below the center, and directly to the right and left of the center. So there's above and below, to the right and to the left. And once I have those 4 points, I just try and form a circle as best I can. Making sure that it's rounded. If you use graph paper, you'll be much more likely to get a nice round circle that looks a little bit ovalish. But if you're drawing graph paper on your own, it's much more likely to look either ovalish or squarish. Be careful that you don't go directly between the points and end up with a rhombus. We are graphing circles. All right, next example, we're given the equation of the circle. So to find the center, pulling those numbers out of the asylum, making them opposite, we have 1, negative 3 for our center. Our radius is the square root of 9, or 3. So graphing, our center was 1, negative 3, so I'm going to start by plotting that point. And then 3 units up, 3 units down, 3 units to the right, and 3 to the left. And then again, just try and curve your circle as best you can. Our last example is going to make us find the radius. So we're given the center point still, but we're also given another point on the circle, so we have to use the distance formula to find the distance from the center to that point, because that distance will give us the radius. So if you don't remember distance formula, actually I'll give you the distance formula first, and then we'll find the radius. So x2 minus x1 quantity squared plus y2 minus y1 quantity squared. Now for the distance formula, the order you subtract your coordinates does not matter, because once you square it, it will become positive. So I don't even worry about x2, x1. I take the bigger number minus the smaller number because then I'm going to get a positive number and I don't have to worry about the negatives when I square it. And you can switch the order from the x to the y's. So looking at my x coordinates, 3 is bigger than -1, so I'm going to do 3 minus -1. 4 is bigger than 2, so I'm going to do 4 minus 2. Simplifying, we get 4 squared is 16, and 2 squared is 4. So our radius is the square root of 20. Now when we write the equation, remember we're going to square the radius. So typically I would tell you to put the square root of 20 in simplest radical form, but for our purposes, we're going to square that and the radical will disappear anyway. So our equation is going to be x, the opposite of -1 squared, plus y minus 2 squared equals the radius squared, or 20. Again, to graph, I'm going to start with the center of my circle at -1, 2. And this time it's going to be a little bit more challenging to graph the circle because 20 is not a perfect square. The square root of 20 is approximately 4.5, so I'm just going to go about 4.5 units in each of those 4 directions. And try and make it as circular as I can. All right, so last we've got your U-try questions.